Back in 2009, if you wanted a truly huge and powerful laptop, you could have gotten the HP Pavilion DV7. A big thank you to Douglas here in Adelaide for giving me this. Let's take a look at this 16-year-old device and see if it's still any good.
When this laptop was released, I had just turned 13 years old, and the cost definitely put it out of my reach. It was large, fully featured, and felt futuristic. But it did sadly come out just before Intel introduced their Core i5 and i7 processors to consumer laptops, quickly dating the Core 2 Duo chip inside here. But how much did this hefty device cost exactly? For this exact spec, there isn't much information, but I did find it listed with a recommended retail price of $25.99 Australian dollars. This ad was accompanied by a few user reviews, such as, "Kids love it. 12-year-old son has not been off the laptop since he got it for his birthday. He seems to love it. He hasn't destroyed it yet, and I have some temporary peace and quiet. There is no downside. It's all win-win." So there we have it, kids love this laptop, and I'm sure adults also thought it was decent enough. And first of all, I'll give it a wipe off with some eucalyptus oil as the surface is quite grubby. The glossy plastic is an absolute fingerprint magnet, and the 17.3-inch display is also one of the biggest you could get in a laptop for the time. This one, once cleaned off, is in almost perfect condition, and I'm glad most laptops today don't use such glossy plastic. Keeping this looking clean must have been a real pain. With a basic wipe down complete, let's power it up and see what it's running. This particular model was eligible for a free Windows 7 upgrade, and that's what's currently running on here. We can also confirm that it has an Intel P8800 dual-core processor and 4GB of RAM, along with a 128GB SSD and a 2TB storage drive. Reading through one of the original advertisements for this model, it seems as if there were much higher tiers available, with dual hard disks from factory and even an Intel quad-core processor. It also turns out that the HP has the exact same processor as the mid-2009 15-inch MacBook Pro I've got here, originally costing about the same amount, funnily enough. But if you wanted a MacBook Pro with a larger 17-inch display, just like the Pavilion, the base model started at a crazy $3,999 Australian dollars. So this laptop seemed like pretty good value, and it did have a few areas that it stood out in. Being marketed as an entertainment laptop, it came with a small TV-style remote. This allowed for basic inputs while at a distance, and the display, even at its maximum brightness, appears to flicker on camera, regardless of the shutter speed I set my camera to. It looks absolutely fine in person though, and the large size of this feature-packed notebook was put to good use when it comes to the port selection as well. Higher spec models also came with a Blu-ray player, which is pretty awesome. Just a dual layer DVD burner in here though. A 3.5mm mic input and dual audio out jacks means two pairs of headphones can be driven at once. It's easy to see why this would have been a compelling option at the time, undercutting most of Apple's MacBook offerings in terms of price. Having a user removable battery is something we rarely see these days, sadly, and adding to the audio experience is the fact that it has a dedicated subwoofer. Honestly, once again, the only aesthetic thing I don't like about this device is the black glossy plastic. Another thing I do like is the ease in which you can access the hard disks. Yes, this does include two 2.5-inch SATA drive bays, and as I found out, you do have to take this particular panel off first, which also covers the RAM. There also looks to be a mini SATA connector, perhaps room for yet another storage drive, and I was definitely surprised to see that this thing used DDR2 RAM given the processor it has. This MacBook Pro with that very same processor uses faster DDR3 RAM. I would have considered putting in extra RAM, but finding two 4GB DDR2 laptop RAM sticks is almost impossible, with most listings either being sold out or insanely expensive. Anyway, I'll see whether that M-SATA looking slot will recognize this solid-state drive I had lying around. It seems to fit, so that's a promising start. Nothing seems to be detected, sadly. Oh well, it was worth a shot. Time to try out the webcam and some hilarious included software. This is called UCam, made by Cyberlink, which allows you to add various templates to your photos and videos shot using the 640x480 VGA resolution built-in camera. And some of the more bizarre and kind of impressive templates track your facial movements, allowing you to become a bear, a clown, or any number of animals. There's also an assortment of shape-altering filters, similar to what you'd find in Apple's Photo Booth app. But what is the quality of the audio and video from this 16-year-old device?
This is a test of the built-in HP web camera, recording at a resolution of, I believe, 640x480. Is it any good? Well, you tell me.
The sound quality is fine, but the video quality leaves a lot to be desired. I also love the screensavers that came with Windows from this time period. It brings back so many memories. There are also a number of excellent desktop backgrounds that still feel fresh and modern to this very day, honestly. And how well does this handle full HD YouTube playback?
Windows XP Pro. This is what it would have originally come installed with.
The sound quality is also decent, which is great to hear, and the display is adequately bright. I would happily watch movies and videos on this device. This laptop would definitely run Windows 10, however, support for that is ending soon sadly. And another option to get more out of this laptop is to run a lightweight version of Linux. And depending on the version of Linux that I choose, it may require me to have a basic understanding of programming and/or coding. And that's where today's sponsor boot.dev comes in handy. If you've ever wanted to dabble in learning back-end web development in an engaging and fun way, this is definitely for you. Be it Python, SQL, TypeScript or Go, boot.dev has you covered. As you complete quests, you'll gain levels and achievements. It's all presented like a role-playing game with fantasy elements, and a competitive leaderboard makes learning to code a real adventure. Given the subject of today's video, the course focusing on Linux is a great place to start. All of boot.dev's content is free to read and watch, but the paid membership unlocks a lot of useful features and tools. There's a huge amount of content with a focus on areas that have real-world importance. I found that the learning curve wasn't too steep, which is perfect for absolute beginners like me to understand the fundamentals. You even get your own personal AI tutor, a bear wizard named Boots. He's been trained to assist you and contextualize any problems that you may be stuck with. There's also a great Discord community. Boot.dev's goal is to make coding fun, and best of all, you're learning skills that are highly valuable in the tech industry, so why not try it today? To find out more, go to boot.dev and use my promo code Psivewri to get 25% off your entire first year on the annual plan. A version I'm pretty familiar with is Linux Mint, and this HP Pavilion will thankfully work with a modern 64-bit version. And once you've downloaded the ISO file, it's super simple to create and install a USB using a program called Balena Etcher. And if you've got an ancient laptop lying around and you're thinking of trying out Linux, I'd highly recommend throwing in a cheap solid-state drive as well. It's surprising just how cheap these have become, and will make your system far more responsive compared to an older mechanical storage drive. Then all you've got to do is boot from that freshly created installer USB, and if all goes correctly, you should, for example, be able to boot from the USB into Linux, then install it onto your internal hard drive. Another thing I'd like to do is redo the thermal paste and see just how cool we can get this old lappy running. For this specific model, there aren't too many tutorials for a complete disassembly, at least that I could find, so I'll have to carefully work my way inside, hopefully without damaging any important components. And I do wish modern laptops would have multiple storage slots, heck, even upgradable storage in the case of modern MacBooks. This Silicon Power SSD can be bought for as low as 25 Australian dollars. But what exactly is the 2TB mechanical drive that also came installed? A Seagate FireCuda, which is actually an SSHD with a small amount of high-speed memory cache for loading frequently used files faster. Now the fun really begins, removing all the small Phillips head screws. There was a somewhat relevant iFixit tutorial that went as far as removing the keyboard, so I'll work with that for now. Out comes the little wireless networking card. If it was to fail, you could easily replace this, and I was pretty sure that I'd removed all the screws, meaning it was now time to gently pry up on the top speaker grill. Note that there are two ribbon cables underneath that need to be disconnected. This can be done from either end of the cable. In hindsight, I'd suggest removing the keyboard first, then simply disconnecting the ribbon cables directly from the motherboard end. The decently sized keyboard is next to come out, held in place by 4 screws, and if all screws on the base are removed, it should easily lift up so you can then disconnect it from the mainboard. The large speaker chamber is next to come out. I was then on my own as the tutorial I was following didn't delve any deeper. I detached every connector to the motherboard I could find, and boy, there were quite a few of them. A single screw holds the optical drive in place. I figured now is a good time to take this out, and with a bit of experience taking similar HP laptops apart, I then removed every visible screw. I was sure to note their location, and this will make my life so much easier when it comes to the reassembly. There were several more screws holding on this metal bracket. I'd imagine this was used to add extra strength to the frame, and with the display connectors and Wi-Fi antennas unrouted, the entire display assembly can now come off. Yes, this is one of those laptops which requires a near-complete disassembly to get to the processors. And some of the last screws I could see were hidden behind the now removed display hinge. Those felt like the last ones holding the top casing on, and with some gentle prying, eventually the two halves came apart. We now get our first unobstructed look at what you could call the underside of the mainboard. That's right, we are still still not done with the disassembly. One of the last items to remove is the small board that attaches to the optical drive, and with every visible connector dislodged, I slowly began lifting the board. And there we have it. The lengthy process is finally over. A single large fan cools the removable CPU and discrete graphics processor. This particular laptop is equipped with an impressive 1GB of video memory, insane for a laptop from mid-2009. And to finally get access to the processor dies, I slowly loosened off all the screws, and being sure to disconnect the fan without damaging the connector. And with the old paste seemingly not sticking to the heatsinks, I slowly lifted off the assembly, revealing the socketed Intel P8800, which draws up to 25 watts of power. The graphical processor found in here was pretty decent for the time, but sadly it isn't upgradable like a lot of cards found in more gaming-focused laptops at the time. I do feel as if a separate fan for the CPU and GPU would have been possible given the size of the laptop, and next I wanted to find out just how dusty the internals of the fan had gotten, although it wasn't as simple as removing the 3 tiny screws to get inside. It seems as if you got to cut through the tape, and after looking back at the footage I was initially slicing in entirely the wrong place, and after much trial and error I was able to get inside the fan. And it's a good thing we did get in as well, as there was quite a carpet starting to form. A blocked fan will make your laptop's fan work harder to keep temperatures down. It shouldn't really matter that I've cut through the tape on here, I hope. And the paste going in is some Arctic MX4, which I've been happily using for several years. Finally, the reassembly can begin. This took a lot more time than I was initially expecting. I slowly tightened opposing screws a few turns at a time for even tension. I figured I'd dust out the internals since I'd gone to all this effort as well. And even if a keyboard appears clean, you'd be surprised how many crumbs can be hidden underneath the keycaps. This laptop mustn't have seen a very hard life since it's not too bad inside. And if anyone was wondering, this is what my screw map looked like in the end. Oh, and here's just how big the subwoofer is. It's thicker than some modern laptops. And piecing it back together wasn't all that bad since I was now pretty familiar with it. And to make the hinge screws stay in place, I added a small dab of thread locker. This is a very elegant looking notebook, but I'd not want to take another one apart anytime soon. It was at this point that I'd realized I'd forgotten one important thing. Luckily, I didn't have to go back in and take too much apart. I think having sound is pretty important, so this had to be reinstalled. And was the surgery a success? Relievingly, it sure was. It always feels great popping open a tray-loading optical drive. Older games running at the native resolution of 1600 by 900 had no problem running on here. And if you don't mind sticking with simpler, older games, there is still plenty of fun to be had with this laptop. And while running a CPU benchmark, I'm happy to see that the CPU only reached 64 degrees Celsius, with help from the new thermal paste and cleaned out fan, no doubt. And all these years later, this is still a solid, dependable laptop with a spacious keyboard. The capacitive volume slider must have felt futuristic back in 2009. And one of the main drawbacks is that this is obviously quite a chunky unit, and the battery is no longer usable. In a lot of ways, it really stood out against the competition, competitively priced and feature-rich with a display that still holds up pretty well. Some may consider this a boring old laptop, but I'm glad to finally own one.
And if you did want a truly huge and powerful laptop, this was a pretty good option. However, today the dual-core processor is really limiting what this thing can do. And recently I released my 102nd, actually this might be my 102nd laptop video. There's a playlist with all of those on YouTube if you want to see them. I can't believe how many laptop videos I've made over the years. Either way, thank you very much for watching. I've got more tech-related content coming soon. You have a good one.